the VC space is very focused on generally hot industries, and nonprofit is not a hot industry.
For sure, yeah.
So just filling the gaps. Hopeful started as a filling the gap business, and that's the way I still think about it. And I wanted to go and create something that could create holistic impact across multiple different verticals. Only about 5% of nonprofits globally actually use the data they collect, which is huge amounts of data, to optimize their practices. To this day, there is no one who does holistic social media donor intelligence like we do. What is it at the simplest level that's leading people not just to hit the like button, but what's leading people to donate and make that a repeatable and scalable process?
Welcome to the Generation Hustle Podcast, the show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and culture, all centered around the millennial. I'm your co-host Ryerson, alongside my good friend Amin, and this week we're exploring the nonprofit industry. Specifically, how can we fundraise better and drive a better donation process? Episode 57 is with Alexander Jivov, co-founder and CEO at Hopeful Inc. Hopeful is the first social fund tech platform that enables nonprofits and charities to monetize their social media followers specifically for fundraising, all while giving them visibility on why donors are engaging through their proprietary storytelling AI dashboard. Alex is a salesperson, digital marketer, full-stack web developer, chef, and published author. Such a wide range of skills that have taken his career through an interesting path. So we sit down to talk to Alex about his career journey and how he pivoted through so many different avenues. He details the process of building a startup in the nonprofit industry, building out a successful team, and the importance of mentorship through accelerators and incubators. This was an incredibly informative episode that's sure to have a bit of everything for everyone, so we hope you enjoy. The full list here: you're a salesperson, a digital marketer, full stack web developer, and a published author on top of that too. So all incredible achievements. How did you get started? Where did you get started? Like, what were your first interests? Like, how did this all start?
So I actually started with a pretty clear goal in mind of what I wanted to do. My original passion out of everything has always been in writing and storytelling. So I originally started off as an intern and then moving up to a national reporter at the National Post. Started there when I was like late 17, 18. Always knew I wanted to be a journalist. Obviously, that was before journalism started changing and morphing more into the internet journalism that we know today, and much more formalized still. So probably starting around third year university, I kind of saw the way the wind was blowing with that profession and realized it wasn't something that was for me anymore. I went into the political realm for a little bit. I did a brief stint in Ottawa. I worked for a lobbying firm. These were just like small internships to get a taste of what the other side of journalism might be and still stay active in those communities, but quickly realized also wasn't for me as well. How I ended up going onto this path for Hopeful is the first kind of sales role that I had was at Politico in the US, and I went to school in the US. And what I really want to focus on is how can I support journalistic endeavors from the sales side and actually learning how those kinds of businesses work. So it was selling to Congress, was selling to Fortune 500 companies, and really enjoyed that job. Came back to Toronto once the student visa inevitably ran out, and then started really getting into the technology and startup game. So I ended up with doing formal sales at Touch Bistro. That was combining my love of food and sales. Big believer in combining if you're selling, especially with something that you love doing, and then really focusing on learning the tech sector from there, and came up with the idea for Hopeful while I was at Touch Bistro. Went to night school for my computer science degree while I was at Touch Bistro, and left 3 years ago and never looked back. And that's what brought me here.
One question I have, and obviously a lot of our listeners ask too, is when they're trying to find different career paths and things like that, they're trying to plan out how they're going to do it or how they're going to get to their next position or next role or next industry or whatever that is. For you, as you were going through all these kind of diverse jobs and things like that, were you planning this at all? Like, was it like in the back of your mind, were you kind of like, oh, I can kind of pair these skills and these skills, or were you kind of just like out there experimenting?
I was really big on experimenting, first and foremost, just because I wanted to make sure that if I was starting to plan things out, it kind of eliminates the experimentation side of things. So I wanted to be able to try as much as possible to kind of wing it. At first, it did purely start off as winging it, frankly. What do I like to do? What I want to do? I went to school in the US and back in Canada. There's a lot of things going on. But then I really adopted this philosophy of if I'm going to experiment, there has to be some framework of you have to like what you do in a profession that is growing and you want to be part of that long term. And that was pretty much the only rule that I set for myself is just have something you enjoy, even marginally, combine it with something that's going to pay the bills and try to learn as much as possible, not just about the company, but about the sector overall, because then that gives you the cross functionality to go anywhere. And that's what I focused on from there is really just doing those two things. Everything else was pure improv, and it worked out pretty well so far.
Yeah.
Sweet. That's awesome, man. Like, and that kind of brings me to my next question here. Like, with relationship to business development, you mentioned you also worked with, companies like Political and Dutch Bistro, in order to kind of help them drive revenue and or any other use case. So, one of the things that I always love learning about is kind of your strategy towards client acquisition. Obviously, you have your manager or senior manager telling you, hey, there's a certain way to do things. But in terms of your kind of specific strategy that you would go into and talk about, hey, this is how we acquire a client. And so what were some of the best practices you use to kind of grow that revenue line and or business?
Well, frankly speaking, asking me, I don't know how applicable it's going to be because in my whole improv strategy, I ended up going into every industry where being a BDR was brutal, frankly.
Okay. Yeah.
So like the restaurant industry, love it, selling into it, not a walk in the park in terms of like just the sheer amount of effort that goes in. The nonprofit sector, not used to traditional BDRing. You have to get a little creative there, and I'm sure we'll talk about how we do it at Hopeful at some point. I am a very big proponent of partner selling, especially when you're starting out as a BDR. You will save yourself so much heartache if you go and you find the people who know the industry better than you, who are already selling into it. So if we're taking the example of, let's say, restaurants, if I'm going and selling point of sale, like I was at Touch Bistro, am I going to people who are selling other software? Are they selling security? Are they selling the vents for exhaust, like the exhaust vents in the kitchens in the back? Those people have been doing it for 30 years. You go to them, you find them first. You essentially BDR partners for the first few months that you're there in any new position. Figure out arrangements that work, and then you essentially create your own inbound engine for yourself outside of what's happening within the company. It gives you a competitive edge. It gives you a lot of ability to start learning about adjacent parts of the business you're selling into. That was one of the biggest things that I took away from when I was selling is finding the partners who are way better than you at this just by a factor of time at a minimum, and then learn from them and get them to drive revenue for you. And that's generally applicable to every kind of sales I've been in.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction to make because we at the podcast also use like partners to kind of help us scale and find different opportunities. So it's interesting to see like different people talk and have the same strategy. So and over time, we'll get to Hopeful in a little bit, but you've built up businesses and stuff like that. What is kind of the core and critical skill set you need to kind of be a good salesman and pitching in front of someone in terms of a use case? Agnostic of any industry.
You just have to really not think about it as much as possible. Overthought, and this was a bad problem for me. And I'm actually very happy that I went from journalism. Journalism was my precursor to sales because that was the nature of just having to talk to everyone under the sun, and that was your job. Overthinking anything is immediately the road to ruin in sales. Especially by the fact if we're taking this from a business development conversation, no matter what, it ultimately does end up being a numbers game. Learn to approach these kinds of conversations from the fact that you can lose the deal, can get yelled at, can get hung up on, God knows what else, but at least there's something to be learned, and then you move on. If you go up and you're overthinking your pitch and you can't think the timing right, it's the worst thing is going to happen. And then there's no one to blame but yourself. You just have to get into this mindset, and it's by no means easy, and I still struggle with it, is just go in, pitch it, put yourself out there. If it doesn't happen, there's 7 billion people on the planet. You'll figure it out.
Right. Exactly. I feel like that philosophy is kind of what's built out your career. Like the way you approach things is just, I want to learn something new, and that's kind of how you're approaching sales as well. And so obviously you mentioned Hopeful. We want to get to that. So Hopeful Inc., you are transforming and helping nonprofits, driving engagement and driving donations. But kind of through your career progression and everything like that, how did you first come upon a nonprofit in that sector itself? And kind of let's talk about Hopeful as well, like what you're doing with the company and what you're looking to accomplish. But yeah, first off, how did you kind of get into the nonprofit sector based on, all of everything else that you were doing right now?
Absolutely. So myself and my family have been involved with nonprofits in Toronto for a very long time. I think it's an incredibly important element of society to be supporting. And I always, essentially, I can't pinpoint the exact time this happened, but I started forming this idea probably near the beginning of when I was at Touch Bistro that I wanted to start an impact company, but not a traditional impact company. Because frankly, I don't have I'm not in agri-tech, I'm not in impact prop tech that are very, very focused on one particular sector, health tech, didn't go to medical school, those kinds of things that A, you need specializations, but B, are very focused on one thing. I wanted to go and create something that could create holistic impact across multiple different verticals and really didn't superimpose on any kind of regional issues, municipal issues. If we're going to be selling worldwide, we can't be everywhere. We can't understand each individual issue. So how could we build an impact layer over a particular sector? What I found was as I was working with nonprofits and I was doing pro bono sales and marketing work and web development work for nonprofits in the city while I was night schooling at U of T, is that there were so many issues as it relates to data within the space. Only about 5% of nonprofits globally actually use the data they collect, which is huge amounts of data to optimize their practices. Nonprofit space, off the top of my head, makes up 9% of Canada's GDP. So we're talking about the same size as the oil industry. So it's not a joke how big this market is. And it was something that desperately needed help. So ironically, Hopeful basically evolved backwards from a strategy of me talking to these nonprofits saying, frankly, there's just so many issues that I'm not going to make a product and then sell it. I'm going to have to work backwards from you to figure out what is it you specifically need. And that's how we got to the social media side. But ultimately, it was a company that was ironically born out of frustration because all of these technologies and solutions exist in the e-commerce world. They exist in the digital marketing world for years. But the organizations that truly save lives and have the most impact, and that's what they exist to do, don't have these kinds of things. So I was like, no one else does this. We need to solve it. There's a market here. The stars kind of aligned, and that's where we are. And now we are, especially now that we've join forces with other companies, we want to make sure that we can really focus on expanding that and making sure social media itself, which is our focus, can be turned into a force for good again for nonprofits and fundraising overall.
Can you speak to kind of the technology behind your product and how you are putting together the data analytics to kind of drive this?
Absolutely. So on the data analytics front, our flagship technology is what we call storytelling AI. What storytelling AI is essentially it takes the concept of nonprofits live or die by the stories they tell, and we turn that into a product. That was our philosophy. From an actual technology basis, essentially it was pretty straightforward. It's built as a web app first. We do have mobile, some that's in the works. And it's really just trying to build straightforward machine learning and AI models. Right now, we're built on GPT-2. We're looking to get built on GPT-3 and really see what is it at the simplest level that's leading people not just to hit the like button, but what's leading people to donate and make that a repeatable and scalable process. So we do actually take the stories that nonprofits are putting together in our platform, and a story can be a fundraising campaign. It could be an event. It could be really anything they define as a story, aggregates all the social media data specific to that story, contextualize it, and lets them see what is it that's leading people to donate. Is it hashtag commonalities, text commonalities, video elements, image elements? What is that? What's that sauce that's leading to donations? Not the e-commerce metrics of likes, comments, impression shares. We provide that, but not the focus. And then even if you are not digitally trained at all, we let you build a social campaign from the ground up. And we have clients that have asked us, what is a hashtag report? That's the level of training that we're trying to cater to.
Right.
So it's just the simple way. It's just an education tool built on fairly straightforward machine learning and AI practices.
For sure. Yeah. And you kind of alluded to it there based on, your clients, some of them don't even know how to work hashtags. So like, what was the initial response to this? Like, how did they react? I guess, how did the nonprofits that you first worked with, like kind of react to this kind of tech?
So, well, since we spent our first year and a half in stealth, we only officially launched in August of last year.
Mm-hmm.
It was already, we essentially got to our product from our customers rather than going out selling to our customers. It got to a point of, out of all these issues, as I mentioned, what's the most important? They said social media. We're posting for the sake of posting, and we have no way to tell what's working, what's not working.
Mm-hmm.
So when they first received it, we essentially built Hopeful in two layers. Firstly, we built it as a social media management tool, a la Hootsuite for the nonprofit space. That already saw, even that basic release led to increases in donations, impressions, and likes upwards of 700 to 800% on average for our clients. Right. Now that we've released our AI component, it saves them many hours on a weekly basis at the end of the year, lets them specifically just immediately see what is it that I need to be focusing on today. It's the simplest things that a lot of us take for granted in the for-profit world. That's proving to be a game changer in this way.
Along this process, I feel like the nonprofits that you're working with are going to have that benefit of having this assistance for them. But from your side of it, can you speak to kind of any of the challenges that you've dealt with as you kind of built out either the product itself or kind of your team or kind of the company, like along
Absolutely.
that journey?
100%. Well, first, COVID is the big elephant in the room, so I won't start on COVID. But so myself and my co-founder, he's currently in India. His immigration was actually just approved to Canada a few days ago, so he's coming over here. We've have employees all over the world, so we've been a fully distributed team, and that includes like up to 12 hours of time difference, which is always really fun to be managing. Right. So being able to keep that engagement, being able to have constant conversations, even with my own co-founder, with that kind of time difference and those kinds of cultural differences, is something that is definitely a unique challenge and took us a while to get to, but it made us a very strong team. We've only had one person leave in the entirety of Hopeful at this point from attrition, which we're very, very proud of. So that was the first step. The second step was, as COVID-19, we were one of the few companies that kind of made it out, and we're very happy about that. But our industry got annihilated by COVID. 50% of nonprofits worry about keeping their lights on. We lost about a quarter of the nonprofits in Canada due to COVID-19. It ended up being a really interesting case for us that we knew that the adoption of social media for fundraising was already coming and was becoming a huge trend. COVID-19 accelerated that trend massively and let us grow, but it also did a ton of damage to our industry. So we had this very interesting situation where on a personal level, we were correct about our hypothesis, but the people that wanted it from us and we were giving it to were getting wiped out, which is, I don't think I'm going to ever encounter that kind of a situation again. But that was really, really tough to work through, but it made us really have to think on our feet on how we were going to address this while also just helping our clients survive while we were going through a sales cycle, which was super interesting.
Right.
For sure.
I was just going to say there's another interesting story with Hopeful as well. Through all this process of COVID-19 and stuff like that, you actually been acquired. So that's obviously a huge thing, right? So,
yeah.
Can you talk about what's that whole process is like? One, maybe in terms of the assessment of finding the right kind of, acquirer and making sure you guys sync from that level. But also kind of the decision-making framework that you kind of took in terms of assessing as a yes or no decision of, let's get acquired.
So for us, that's a great question. And so for us, it was a very fast acquisition. From first text asking to close was about 5 weeks, which is super, super fast. Mm-hmm. I will always say, no matter what, get acquired by someone you've done work with and you know well. Mm-hmm. We were acquired by another DMZ company, Wisely, and their group. They essentially are a sister company. They were doing AI fundraising at a higher market level than we were, so we had already put synergies in place. they had already considered investing in us previously before, like 2 months before this acquisition happened. So the DD was fast on it, and we all knew each other. Everyone knowing each other really contributed to this deal going quickly, integrations going well, the ideas of things happening. We're still obviously transitioning because it's been 2 weeks since this closed, but it's been a much better process than if it had been having to meet all brand new people and no idea what each other's practices were, things like that. All of the actual mechanisms just seemed seamlessly move together really well. So I always recommend that. And then overall for us, when we got acquired, and Aman, you and I touched on this at one point as well when we last spoke, is we got to a point that we had just graduated from Berkeley SkyDeck. We had raised our initial capital. The VC space is very focused on generally hot industries, and nonprofit is not a hot industry.
For sure, yeah.
So we basically came to a conversation where it's like, okay, we can keep pursuing we can keep fundraising, we're growing, but it's going to be basically punching through concrete the whole time. It distracts us from what we want to do. Like, I'm not getting any chance to sell. Why don't we have an opportunity to join forces with a company that we have good synergies with? It's strategic. It allows us to really have a much greater impact for for the companies or the clients that we want to help, rather than just being a fundraising company is what it was coming to. So when it came down to it, it was a pretty easy decision. When we got that first reach out, we're like, yeah, let's do it. And we're really happy with that. Of course, from a personal level, getting that exit within a year of launch is great, but that was something that was not in our minds. It was what's going to be the most strategic thing for the company right now. And it just by far and away, it was better than just going out and raising more cash.
Yeah. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs always kind of have, that decision in front of them sometimes. Is like, I have the chance to be acquired. And it's very rare to be within a year get acquired. So huge kudos on you, obviously building something up and, getting successfully acquired. But things to obviously take away from here, make sure you have synergies, make sure you have obviously a good product market fit in terms of the solution. But also maybe an extension of this is like, did you kind of seek any mentorship from someone senior or someone or a founder that's actually been acquired before? And maybe any other tips and tricks before you went full on board with the acquisition?
So for us, we had our full board with Berkeley SkyDeck. I'm very close with all of our advisors in the Valley over there. So we had a lot of input on this. I would say the one thing I would caveat is that synergies, obviously important. Being friends and knowing each other's processes and how you work, way more important. If the synergies are sort of unclear, but you have that understanding, you'll figure out the synergies after. And I'm very, very adamant about that part of it. That should be the first thing to focus on. We took a lot of advice, but ultimately it just came down to our decision, because especially with we have amazing, amazing mentors, but there's of course always that lens of, are they VCs themselves? Are they investors? What lens are they themselves thinking through? And if you're not directly involved in your company, I was leaning more on our board members who obviously had skin in the game, rather than outward mentorship or something like this. But it required a lot of conversations, but had to keep your own eye on the prize the whole time.
A lot of things that you touched on there is kind of relationship management. And you mentioned having that friendship and having those relationships and knowing the people that you're working with is kind of driving that success. And so that kind of brings me to when you were building out your team at Hopeful. Something that you mentioned is that you were actually, heavily involved in the process of interviewing over 50 candidates for positions throughout your company. And so when you're looking to kind of build out that team and see who you want to work with and kind of, strategize together with, what do you look for in people? Like, how do you define success as it comes to your teammates and your employees? Like, what are some of the things that you're looking for in your candidates that you're kind of interviewing and going through with?
Well, how good I am at hiring in HR is still very much so an open conversation. But I would say as I've kind of alluded a couple times, I just try to keep things as simple as possible these days and in general, because overcomplicating anything makes it hard.
Right.
Hiring is something I try to keep as close to that philosophy as possible. I need to make sure that you communicate and you want to make sure that you're very open with what your opinions are. And we have to be very upfront. We go in we're very blunt about everything with the company to all of our employees.
Mm-hmm.
We say it upfront to anyone we're hiring. And if they don't want to be part of that, then okay, that's completely fine. Sometimes it throws people off how open like I am in these kinds of beginning conversations. Communication solves all problems, especially on a distributed basis. One-on-ones, having meetings with people, making sure that even if there's 4 rounds of interviews for a startup, making sure you get to know that person. That is ensured that I've almost never had an issue with any of our employees. Everyone is very clear on what their expectations are. The resumes you can understand the resume, but I will spend much more time just why are you applying? Are you applying just because you need a job? Then not the right case for you. Are you applying because you want to help the nonprofit space and you actually believe in what Hopeful is doing and you have the skill set to back it up? Okay, then we'll keep talking. And then we'll have interviews that are literally just conversations. There's no kind of agenda there. There's nothing there, just to talk. And then it ends up being a gut check a lot of the time. Granted, as we keep growing, does that system still stay as effective? That's also, we'll see how it happens with that. But it led to an amazing team. And almost all of our original core team is still with us. So I think it's worked so far.
I hope that process doesn't change. I mean, I think obviously we were talking about the interview process and job searching earlier. And I think that process really needs to change in how people kind of perceive each other and how they connect. Because like you said, there's a lot of jobs where people just kind of come in and they just want a job to make money, but they can't say that. And then you have this weird dynamic and it shows up in how the company culture and their own performance as well, right?
You can pretty much tell within the first 30 seconds if you're the founder. I would say this is only applicable to a founder interview, honestly.
Right.
If you know that person is the right fit.
Right.
And sometimes, I've been proven wrong once before on this, but otherwise, within the first 30 seconds, I generally can tell if it's a yes or no.
So, I mean, you've built out an incredible foundation, and obviously that's led to all the success that you've reached thus far. What do you see kind of for the future of Hopeful? What do you want to, what do you foresee in the next maybe 2 to 5 years? And where do you want to be from that?
So at this point, we're obviously in this transition period. So we're really focusing on growing out what kind of intelligence we can provide to our technology partners and nonprofits, anywhere from predicting the actual social media popularity of individual posts to actually being able to pull social media information on individual donors and putting them back into their CRM. So adding in a whole new layer of social media on that side of things. So that's going to be a really exciting time to release. Personally, what I'm most excited about is our expansion into also acting as a digital agency for our clients. So for foundations, philanthropies, larger organizations that actually need help running full campaigns, getting things off the ground, that's a part of our business that's been growing pretty rapidly since we just launched it this month.
For sure.
So I'm super excited to do that. You get down and dirty. You really learn how to interact with people who really truly care about each of these individual nonprofits you work with. So really expanding the intelligence we can provide. To this day, there is no one who does holistic social media donor intelligence like we do. So making sure that we can continue integrating with the top players in the space and just filling the gaps. That's Hopeful started as a filling the gap business, and that's the way I still think about it, and that's the way I'm still focusing on it.
Right. That's awesome. And maybe a word of advice for anyone trying to get into, say, the nonprofit sector. They're kind of interested in it, or they're affiliated in some way, some form. How can someone maybe explore and make an impact within an industry? Obviously, that's kind of not traditionally, obviously, for profit, right? So, what would you say, or pieces of advice would you give a future entrepreneur?
So I would think that with ourselves, Wisely also exited. There's a really good trend now happening that we also, as a sub philosophy, as I like to call it, wanted to prove that it is a profitable industry to be in as a founder. You just have to make sure that you do a lot of upfront product work. Make sure you make a lot of partnerships up front. Talk to a lot of nonprofits, because nonprofit sales cycles are generally they're not fast. You have to have patience. You have to make sure that you're navigating these waters well. If you're a founder and you want to go into this, do nonprofit work first. Go to Charity Village, go to GuideStar, see if there's an organization nearby. Charity Village has your volunteering opportunities. They'll have anything from social media coordinators to IT devs. You can do the job specifically that you want to do within a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Then from there, start thinking about actually being a founder in the space because there's a lot going on. It's very fast moving, but it has a very interesting culture. So more than any other industry, you have to actually work in it for at least a certain amount of time before you should think about founding anything.
Sweet. No, that's awesome advice. And, just pairing that on, you mentioned the DMZ and the programs that they provided, but, how have they kind of helped accelerate you from a personal level in terms of your development, but again, scaling hopeful in terms of getting to that level of being acquired?
Absolutely. Well, the DMZ was amazing for us from a personal standpoint. We were the last cohort that was there before the post-COVID changes kicked in. So I guess the environment's different now. But it really gave me the confidence to be a founder. It gave me the confidence to really get good information from people I otherwise wouldn't have access to. Everyone at the DMZ, Abdullah, Andrea, Natasha, Shane, everyone has been absolutely awesome. We talk to them regularly. So they really were the springboard that got us going. And then Berkeley SkyDeck, which was the actual accelerator, was what really gave us presence in the US, gave us presence in the Valley, gave us a really deep link into kind of the mecca of tech and tech startups and got us into a good place to start fundraising. Now, obviously, we didn't end up fundraising, so that it ended up going a little bit of a different way than anticipated, but absolutely amazing people to be part of as well. I just referred a close friend of mine who's a founder to them too. Like both are amazing. I would say doing an incubator and then an accelerator combo is an amazing way to go, especially if it's your first company.
We love the DMZ. We've connected with them quite a few times, and they really believe in the people that they work with. And I feel like that resonates with everything that you've been talking about in terms of how you've built out your career and how you kind of look at your kind of clients and your teams and things like that. I think that really resonates together. And so I think that's a great partnership there. And we're always happy to meet new people who work with the DMZ. That being said, that kind of concludes like some of the questions that we had about Hopeful Inc. But one thing that we like to do with all of our guests is kind of just do a lightning round where we toss some quick questions at you just to get to know you a bit better. Obviously, there's a lot to know about you based on kind of your career progression. And so we're just going to toss some quick questions and just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
First off, can you tell us your favorite book or movie of all time?
Oh, favorite. This is going to be tough. Favorite book actually I just picked up called it's a thick one called Creation of the Silk Road. It's basically a history of everything about the Silk Road, everything we learned in history class, ancient Roman Empire, all the way to Columbus. It's been an awesome book. Highly recommend that one. Favorite movie? I'm really behind on my movies right now, so I'll skip that one because that's not a lightning round question for me.
Totally fair. If you could have dinner with one person anytime in history, who would that be?
Any time in history. Again, you'll kind of get a flavor that I'm an antiquity guy. Would love to have dinner with Alexander the Great. I would also love to have dinner with Elon Musk right now, just because the volume of different stuff he's doing. I'm really curious what his mental state is these days. How they're all asleep.
Yeah, for sure. Elon's one that we get a lot from a lot of the founders that we work with. Next question here. What is, and you touched on this as well with Amin, but speaking to young professionals, a lot of our audiences is very young professionals looking to kind of explore their career and explore their career development and their personality development as well. What is one piece of advice you give to anyone who's kind of entering that workforce?
I would say I really, really wish I had done this more so. Take as many online courses, audit as many classes as humanly possible, get like the practical experience. I'm a very tactile learner, but it took me a while to really hone in on that. Being able to just sit on Udemy, if you're in Toronto, just audit courses, you have to immediately do that. It will save you so much time on figuring out what you want.
For sure. We love it. I think continual development is always the key.
Yeah.
Last but not least, we always have a controversial question that we have to throw in. This is one that Amin and I always spar about. So we want to know your thoughts. Do you like pineapple on your pizza?
No. Good God, no.
Yes.
That was automatic.
Absolutely not. You're asking the guy who's to be a chef. No. That's the easiest one.
Exactly.
You know,
See?
yeah, I was gonna say, you know what? This is actually a great opportunity. Can you give us some kind of chef advice on why this is bad? I don't understand it, but maybe you can give us
Honestly,
some insight.
I've been asked this so many times. It's just something against nature. It doesn't work. I've had it like twice before in my life, and I can't do it.
Yeah, I
It
can't do
just
it
doesn't
either.
make sense. If you're gonna do the sweet on pizza, just get like a freaking dessert pizza and call it a day.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Yeah.
That's too sweet though. But we'll take it. It's all good.
I have a big sweet tooth, so for me,
Yeah.
there's no upper limit there.
Yeah. I mean,
For sure.
pineapple's grilled with some cinnamon on it. Go for it all day kind of thing.
Yeah, just that. Like,
Yeah. But not on pizza, that just destroys the whole thing for me.
exactly.
Alex, this has been great. Obviously, we wanted to understand kind of what Hopeful is doing and kind of understand more about you and your career progression and how you kind of built yourself to where you are today. We're super excited to see all the nonprofits that you're going to continue to be working with, but let us know where we can find you and where we can connect with you. I know you have a lot of pages, so feel free to place some plugins here.
Absolutely. Easiest way to find me personally, LinkedIn and Instagram. It's just Jivov, Jivov. Easiest place to find me. If you want to look at some food, I have a food Instagram, shameless plug, Big Belly 6, can go there.
Love it.
And then for Hopeful, honestly, LinkedIn, just Hopeful Inc. or on Instagram, Hopeful Company. That's where you'll find us. We're pretty voracious posters, obviously, by the nature of what we do. But if you want to find me, I'm always available. I'm happy to chat with anyone who's interested about a journey or has questions about being a founder.